Hello, happy December. I am taking a break from releasing new episodes this month, but Girls Talking Life is re-releasing some top shows from 2020. If you're new here, chances are you haven't heard them yet. And if you've been listening for a while, these stories are probably ones you want to hear again. Let's dive in. Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Do you feel tethered by something in your past? Like you can't quite move through the grief of an event? Or do you wonder what it means to really walk in freedom? Amy Loflin, my guest today on the show, encourages women to abandon their self-imposed prisons of shame or unforgiveness, replace the limitations of bitterness with the progress of forgiveness, and accept true transformation. Today, Amy and I chat about her role in ministry, leading the outreach for her church as the Serve Director. Amy tells us that God has been prompting her to find her voice and to share more of her story with others, so that's exactly what we're doing today. Amy talks about losing her mom as a young adult and holding her family at arm's length as a means of self-preservation. She also shares a very personal story of forgiveness and tells us that it's a continuous process and not a one-time event. She shares some intimate moments where God showed her how to unleash herself and to trust Him more. I do want to let you know that Amy talks briefly about sexual abuse. She does not go into detail whatsoever, but I want you to be aware that it's coming in case that's something that isn't good for your heart to hear. Everything we talk about can be found in the show notes for today's episode on girlstalkinglife.com. Here is my conversation with Amy. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Johanna. It's a true honor. Absolutely.
I feel like a lot of times I've gotten to know my guest in some other way, but I really don't know you a whole lot. So I would love for you to introduce yourself to me and to my listeners, and just what do we need to know about you?
Absolutely. Well, I am in North Carolina, central North Carolina. I've born and raised here. I've always lived here. My husband and I, we grew up 20 minutes apart, but we met at NC State University. So that's kind of funny. And he has a family business. And so we settled in this area. We're in just the heart of the Triad, in a small town called Kernersville.
Okay.
But it's right in the middle of three kind of larger cities. And so it's nice to have access to a lot of other things. So yeah, we have two sons. Jacob is 18 and he is a freshman in college this year. So that's been a big transition year for us. And then our other son is Ben, and he is a sophomore in high school right now. Just got his license about 2 weeks ago. So yeah, always something going on.
All right. Fantastic. And you are the Serve Director at your church.
I am.
And I can imagine what that means, but can you talk to me about it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my husband, Chad, and I and our family, we have been a part of the Summit Church. I think we started attending there, I want to say in 2010. And then I came on staff a couple of years after that. And so my role is basically community outreach. So everything that has to do outside of a Sunday, I get to participate in. And it's an amazing job. It's our church, our vision statement is to receive and share the love of Jesus. And so it's that constant process that all of us are in to first receive and start to understand what is this great big God that we serve, and try to get our heads around as best as our human capacity can control His love for us. And start to understand that it's rooted in His identity, that we can trust that He is who He says He is, and start to receive that. And then it's out of that just natural overflow as we start to understand it and grapple with it and receive it. Then it's then that we just organically want to share it. And that can look in a variety of different ways for every single person. I think it's going to be unique for all of us. But definitely, as far as my role goes, with that lens, it's continually meeting people where they are and understanding that we're all, on a different journey and different path. in our lives and, specifically spiritually. So thinking about our community, working along those lens of, if our church were to disappear, would anyone notice? And really that's kind of the filter of what I use and my team uses and how we decide what we're going to be doing in the community. And as far as meeting people where they are, recognizing that needs look in such a variety of ways around us. Our specific and immediate community would probably be considered affluent. And so some of those needs are just simply relational, wanting to help just the community have some opportunities for family connection. And maybe that's a free movie night in the park or something like that. Spiritual, always thinking about the spiritual, because everybody has a next step, no matter where they are, in their faith. And then of course it doesn't take long, you don't have to drive far, and there are economic needs and financial needs that we are constantly meeting. So again, it's a process of meeting people where they are, but it's not only, that we're thinking about that for the people in our community, but also within our church. And so as my role, and our team, we are constantly thinking about, again, everyone's next step. And then specifically, what does that look like for them serving? And that, of course, is the piece of sharing the love of Jesus that they're learning to receive. And we all are. And so we're definitely a church that attracts the unchurched, the de-churched, the overchurched, whatever you want to call them. Mm-hmm. So, on any given week, you may have someone in our row that has been a Christian all their lives and are a very active Christ follower, and they're sitting right beside someone who would identify as an atheist or an agnostic, or maybe someone who has been returning to church after being hurt by church, after 20, 30 years or something. So we also design, our outreach with them in mind too. Like, how can we meet them where they are and help provide those easy yeses for people to engage and to share? So, for someone, it may be, our most recent serve was we purchased a lot of backpacks and with tags on them with lists of things to purchase. And they're ultimately for kids that are going to be going into the foster care system in our area. And so for some people, it's grabbing a backpack and they go shopping and they fill it and they bring it back the next Sunday. And that may be their very first step in serving. And we just celebrate the mess out of that. But for others, they're ready to partner with one of our agencies on a regular basis and really dig in, or, step onto a mission team or something like that. So.
Okay. And you oversee that too?
Yes.
Wow. That sounds challenging and yet so rewarding. And
it is. It really is. It's fun. It's wonderful to see people take those steps, and a lot of people may come in and they want to put their hands on everything for a bit, and then suddenly you see somebody really get their heart broken for something specific. Maybe that's food insecurity or something like that, and then they really start to just delve into one of our partner agencies, and they're showing up there on a continuous basis. And so it's very rewarding, and I feel like I have a front row seat to a lot of that.
Yeah, knowing where to plug in is not always an easy thing.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. You're right. It's I think most people have that desire and want to help, but they don't really know how. And so, yes, like I said, we just really try to give people an easy yes to step into something and see where God leads them from there. So,
okay, great. So you were a school counselor for 7 years and then a stay-at-home mom for 7 years. And now you're in your current role at your church, and it's been another 7 years. Are you ready for a transition?
Well, I don't know. It's one of those things I'm just keep saying yes to God. And just recently, within the past couple of years, I've started to pay attention to that urge, I guess is the best way, that desire to start using my voice more. It was easy to ignore for a while, and I kept pushing it aside, and because I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. But I just, in a variety of different ways, just felt that urge. And I do feel like it's been something that's Spirit led, that God has just continued to say, I'm writing a beautiful story with you, and it's not just for you. I want you to share it. And I think through this process of my job, and again, meeting people where they are, it's almost as if God has gifted me with this lens, and it's not perfect and it's still in progress and I drop it a lot of times, but it's almost as if I have these glimpses of time, whether I'm standing in the lobby and I'm seeing people coming down our sidewalk, or I'm at the grocery store in a line, or, I'm at a ball game with for my son, or whatever that may look like, that it's almost as if I have this glimpse of people that it's not just flesh and blood around me, but it's walking stories. And it's just an exciting thing to see, because just through this process of recognizing God's hand throughout my own story, and then it makes me curious. I wonder what he's doing in their story. I want to see that. And I wonder if they know. Do they know how much God's hand is in their story? So that's what excites me. And just connecting with him, and just stories throughout Scripture and the life of Jesus, and how much he speaks to us. And that word is so living for all of us. And it just makes me curious.
I love stories too. And that's part of why I do this, is I want to share, help share the stories of women and what they're up to and what God is doing in their lives. And so what do you do? I know you have that curiosity, and I absolutely do too. How do you draw those stories out, and what do you do with them once you know?
Right. I think that's a great question. Well, I think personally, I first had to admit the value of my own, and the value of my own voice, and that just started small, admitting it to, a dear friend, admitting that desire to my husband, and then to one of my pastors. And
those are some of the hardest steps.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
And, when you get that encouragement and that thumbs up from some of those key people in your life, you're like, okay, maybe this is a thread that I need to start pulling. So that led me to saying yes to attend She Speaks conference, which is through Proverbs 31, Lisa Turkhurst. And so that was 2 summers ago. And then shortly after that, and because I wasn't sure exactly what God was doing through this, I kept being encouraged to find a platform or a venue. Like what is your specific voice addressing? And maybe I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm not sure about that. But just recently, it was last fall, I attended the Women's Speaker Collective that was charged by Danielle Strickland and her incredible team. And again, just another workshop to help me find my voice, and where's the story leading?
It's amazing to hear other stories.
Yeah, right.
How they encourage you in your own. Yeah, I love that.
Oh, absolutely. And just the connection with the other women that have the same desire, and hearing what God's doing through and with and for them. And it just seems to explode. But I also, as much as I enjoy, sharing a message from a stage, whatever venue that might look like, one of, I think, the best things too is just grassroots. It's circling up with your tribe, people that know you so well and love you so well, and hearing their stories and praying together, but then also circling up with people that you don't know very well. And that's risky, and that's part of our groups model with our church. But just that grassroots or even just sitting across the table from someone with a cup of coffee that, you want to get to know a little bit better, and hearing their story. And so, I don't know, it's just all encompassing.
We started a new small group this week, actually.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And some of the couples we know fairly well. Yeah. And then there are maybe 7 new couples, and we're actually going to start a marriage study. Oh. And it's really exciting because I don't know any of these people, and I want to know their stories. And
wonderful.
We are the more mature marrieds
yes.
in this group. So that's kind of exciting that maybe we have some wisdom or something to model.
No doubt.
But it's also maybe just for me, but it's kind of nerve-wracking too.
Oh, it is. Well, you have to get vulnerable.
Right.
Right. And for me, it's not worth it not to step into situations like that and just take off your mask, and just get real and say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, or this is what's difficult, and then you hear across the circle, me too, I get it, and you're not alone, and it's okay. And oh man, there's so much value in that. There's so much healing. So yeah, I love that.
All right, Amy, your message is to move forward in freedom. You want others to be able to move forward in this freedom. And
right.
That's so beautiful, so important. And what do you do? How do you encourage others to do this? Because we all have things in our past, things that we've done that we just want to cringe when we think about, or, even things that have been done to us that we just wish we could erase.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
How do you encourage others to break those chains?
Well, I think what I can share a bit about is just one example from my own story. When I was in college, my mom died of a sudden and massive heart attack. I was 21, and mom and I were very close. We had just a really strong, very special relationship. And so I can't share much of my own story without sharing that part of it because it was so instrumental in my life. One, just our relationship was so instrumental for me and the foundation that she built for me and the values that she instilled in me. But then, of course, the loss of her death, of how it shaped me.
I can't imagine losing a
Oh,
mom, especially at
yeah,
that age. Any age is bad, but that's young adult. You need your mama.
absolutely. Yeah, it was really hard. It was because we were just at that cusp of our relationship shifting into more of a friendship, and so, but just to share a couple of things that I feel like God used that situation to shape me because it was such a sudden loss. It was just a complete jolt. But I think that I didn't realize what an idol my mom was for me.
Mm.
And I think that grief, that loss, it left me so reeling that I remember saying out loud, who do I dance for now? And I don't dance. let me make that clear. My husband is a great dancer. I do not dance, but just figuratively. Who do I
Right.
dance for? Because she was such an encourager to me, such a support. She was always the first one I call with big news or, test grades like, Mom, this class is going great or whatever it looked like. And so it left me very unstable with her sudden death. And so that process of grieving, I knew that at some point it was either going to make me bitter or better. And I know so many people have had to make that decision. Okay, this is either going to tear me up and leave me just a shell of a person, or I'm going to honor her and honor my God and honor myself and honor those that I love and just see how I can grow through this. And so many lessons just through that whole process. I would say I felt like I was grieving in a pretty healthy way, the first several years of that, but fast forward a few years, and Chad and I had been married for a few years, and the boys were young. And periodically, he kept coming to me and saying, Amy, I feel like you're holding back. I feel like I'm at arm's length with you. And honestly, I got kind of frustrated hearing that. I kept thinking, I don't know what your problem is. I'm good. We're good. We're happy. What's going on here? And I just kept ignoring it and really arguing about that. But he just kept lovingly coming back to me and just trying to point this out to me. So eventually there was this pivotal moment in my life. We were on the beach with several friends, and there was a few seconds where I didn't know where Ben was. And Ben was probably about 2.5, I think, at this point. And I remember he didn't have a life jacket on at the time. And so it was that moment, and I think every parent experiences it at some point along
Oh,
our
yes.
It's just inevitable. We're all going to have that freak out moment of where's my kid, whether you're in a mall or you're on the beach. But the phrase that came to my head was, oh, so it's going to be Ben. And I took off walking a little bit faster. And then it literally a few seconds later, I found him. He was with a friend and he was having a blast and he was safe. But that phrase kept coming to my brain over the next, that evening and whatnot. And it was finally, we were on our way home from the beach and the boys were asleep in the back seat. And I just sobbed to Chad because I finally got it. I understood that it wasn't just a fear that something had happened to Ben. It was an expectation. And it was as if I realized in that moment, just like every parent has that healthy fear or worry, that something could potentially happen to someone that we love. I was actually waiting for it. And I think that what occurred to me in that time was that my mom's death was so sudden and so traumatic for me that subconsciously I decided I'm going to go ahead and grieve everybody else. I'm going to go ahead and grieve my husband.
She was taken quickly and unexpectedly, and anyone else could be too.
Yeah, I didn't trust life. I did not trust. I don't know if I'd say I didn't trust God, but I'm sure there's probably a piece of that in there. But yeah, I think there was a part of me that just thought, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I never want to feel that pain again. So if I go ahead and just assume it's going to happen, I'm going to be ready. Of course, that's foolish. But it took that circumstance that I felt like God just kind of used to say, Amy, this is the way you're living, and there's a byproduct in this that you are not all in. You are holding the three most precious men in your life at arm's length as this self-preservation. And it was such a turning point for me. And I wouldn't say I immediately changed. I did immediately have a new perspective, but I think it was kind of like trying to turn a cruise ship around that I would start to recognize, okay, wait a minute, I can feel safe. And that was another shift of me that I started to see pieces of my grief process as a gift, that God had used it to shape me in positive ways. And I decided to pour more into that. And then fast forward several years down the road. And in fact, this was maybe 8-9 years ago or so. And I was, the boys were probably late elementary school, early middle school, something like that. And I remember driving, and I could even tell you what road I was on. And I was just tossing up this popcorn prayer. God, shape my boys into the men that you want them to be for your kingdom. It wasn't this huge heartfelt prayer. Maybe one of them was going through something difficult at the time, or, something like that. And it was as if in that moment that I had this sweet, tender voice say, Amy, I used your mom's death to shape you into the woman, and shaping, because I'm obviously have not arrived anywhere, but use that to shape you into the woman that I want you to be for my kingdom. And it was almost as if it was this question of, how much do you really mean that prayer? It was almost as if him asking me, what if that even means you're not their mom anymore? And it was this, I can remember hearing my own audible gasp of, wow. But just seconds later, having the ability to exhale that and think, okay, God, you've taught me so much through this process of my grief that I trust you. And what a surreal moment of recognizing, okay, my hands are wide open, even with my own boys, that if that meant that I am taken from this earth for them to be shaped into the men God wants them to be, then okay. And please don't think that I'm some kind of martyr, or that I have some kind of death wish or anything like that. Of course, I want to be here as long as possible. I want to live to a great old age and enjoy grandchildren and all of that. But it was another just pivotal turning point of being able to trust God that, boy, there's freedom. There's freedom right there of realizing that no matter what happens, that God's going to use it for good, as long as we allow it.
I feel like that's such a hard thing for me too. I have 2 girls, and
yeah,
I know he loves them more than I do, that I'm able to, and allowing, not that I have the power to not allow him, but to trust him with that is a really difficult thing.
It is. Yeah. It is. Well, and there's nothing like a mother's love. I mean, it's so unique and special, and we all have that mama bear that comes out and want to protect and love and wrap our arms around them. But just that process of realizing, like you just said, he loves them and knows them so much better than we do, and being able to trust in that. But it is a very freeing place to be, as a parent, to recognize, and I'm getting to this place in parenthood that, being older and my boys, I'm not empty nester yet, but just being able to see, like, okay, wow, God has used that difficult time that my son faced in middle school, let's say. And now I'm seeing the resiliency that he has now, and he's now able to face this difficult circumstance and not just survive it, but thrive through it. It's glorious to see that. So,
and the more and more you see that, the result of trusting him and how he was faithful to you or your children, the easier it is.
Yeah. Big piece of it. But yeah, that's kind of one example of just how I feel like we can trace back how we just see God's hand, throughout our story.
And you kept saying your husband was reminding you or pointing out to you that you were keeping them at arm's length, and you talk about living unleashed. So, I mean, is that where you get that description? Because you were leashed?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think so. And I think we're all leashed in some different way. You know, we can't walk this earth without any kind of wounds or strongholds that all of us face. You know, whether that's a health diagnosis or an addiction or something done to us or something that we've done, self-destructive choices that, you know, I believe that whether it's the enemy or just our own insecurities or whatever that is that try to keep us from living the best version of ourselves. And we begin to believe those lies that circulate in our heads and that constant, okay, whose voice does this sound like? You know, I think that's just one filter that all of us can use through our lives. That is this a lie that I'm believing, or is this God's truth? Does this sound like something that a loving God, a loving Father, a divine creator would be saying to me? And does it line up with scripture? Then, okay, let's pull that thread. Let's pay attention to that. But if it's not, then we need to learn how to discount it and grow away from that.
You talked about trusting God through your grief and with your children.
Mm-hmm.
What about things like unforgiveness and maybe shame?
Yeah, I think everybody that's different stories of what those look like in their own lives too. And I think just one example I had a hard lesson in forgiveness from some sexual abuse that I experienced as a 5-year-old. And definitely grew through this. Oh my, just different seasons in my life, pivotal circumstances that God healed that wound. And even just recently, it was funny. It was actually when I was reading through the Enneagram. I'm a 2. And it was something I was learning through that process. And I was having just this really sweet conversation, I felt like, with God, and through prayer, reliving that. You know, I think forgiveness is a constant process, because if you ask me if I have forgiven that person, I did a long time ago. Absolutely did. And progressed through that. But yet God still is growing me through this process. But anyway, this most recent conversation, I would call it, that I had was so sweet and it was tender. And for some reason, some of those emotions were pulling back up in me. I was feeling that, being that 5-year-old again, and being in that room and starting to feel some of those emotions again. And God, He was just telling me through that, you know, Amy, I was with you the whole time. And I know, God, I know you were. I knew that already. It's like He was just reminding me, like, yeah, I know that, God. And then all of a sudden his voice, it was like He said, but you weren't the only one I was with in that room. Ugh.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow. That was a gasp, another gasp moment. And like, yeah, God, I get it. I know you were with him too. And there was a reason. His brokenness led him to do that. And I don't know how to explain it. But again, it was another, I thought I had already gone through that forgiveness process, but that sweet conversation of like, wow, there's even more. There's it's like an onion, you know, just feeling those layers of, wow, there's always more to learn. There's always more depth to grow into of, okay, our God is so much bigger than we ever think that He is, you know?
I'm sorry, I'm crying.
It's okay. I'm sorry.
It's been an emotional couple of days for me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think that, I don't know, as God's just so stinking good. If I could just put it plainly, I feel like, you know, I'm 46, just recently turned 46 years old. And especially in this process of wanting to use my voice. And I've thought, why didn't I want to do this 20 years ago? Why didn't I want to start this earlier? And I thought, no, this is where God has me in this process. And it's been great because I would say over the past 2 or 3 years, I've been learning to get to know Him on a whole new level. It's almost as if, because I grew up Christian, I grew up in a Presbyterian home and I don't know of a time in my life that I wasn't learning about Jesus and who He is. But I think just lately, the past few years, I've been going through this process of, I know deconstruction is a big word right now, but I feel like mine was more of a restoration, like kind of like an art restorer. And this is not my own analogy. I read it somewhere recently, and forgive me, I don't know which author I read this from, but he was talking about his own process and how he compared it to art restoration, and how an art restorer gently and delicately would use his tools to chip away at the crud that builds up over time over a masterpiece, to try to get to that truth, that the beautiful original design underneath. And I just appreciate that analogy so much, because during some of that time, I did feel like I was almost tiptoeing into deconstruction, almost like a big bomb going off. I was like, okay, no, I don't have to destroy everything that I've learned to believe and know and trust. But it's just this a delicate, faith-filled process. But more than anything else, I feel like God just keeps blowing up my boxes. Almost like this little, like I'm this cartoon character that just keeps building these boxes and showing them to God, like this gift, like, okay, look, God, look what I built you. And he just smiles at me and says, oh, Amy, I'm so much bigger than that. And I hold up my finger like, okay, hold on, I'll be right back. I'll tear that box down and build a bigger one and show it to him again. He's like, and finally it's like he looked at me and just said, Amy, do you really think you're capable of building a box big enough for me? And it was freedom, freedom. There's that precious word again, and just feeling unleashed, that I'm not trying to leash him even anymore. It's just this, I don't have all the answers. I don't understand so much, even, not only through my own story, but through the people that I love and stories that they're walking through, and parts of scripture that I don't understand and can't really seem to make sense of. It's just, I just come back down to the word love. It's just love like Jesus did. And that just seems to be the anchor that I just keep having to come back to.
Well, thank you for sharing that. There is a worship song that we would sing pretty regularly in church with a line that says, "It is for freedom that we are set free."
Oh, yes.
And for the longest time, I did not understand what that meant.
Right? Yeah.
I'm like, well, yeah.
Right. It almost seems too obvious, but then it doesn't. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I found the Bible reference, and it is not a command, but we are set free to enjoy that freedom. Like, that is something that God wants for us. We are to enjoy that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I just feel like that's what Jesus means with thy kingdom come. Yeah. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And it's, heaven isn't something we just sit around and wait for and pray for and imagine. It's, how do we make it a reality here on earth? And that's freedom. And that's sharing that freedom. It's not just finding it for ourselves. Again, it's coming back to that receive and share. Because if we really are receiving it, we can't help but share it, and our faith doesn't, it's not just a list of check boxes of things that we do. And okay, check, I served, check, I gave, check, I joined a group, or whatever that looks like. It's, oh my gosh, this God is just so stinking big. He's so great. His love is so unreal that I just, the natural organic overflow is that I want to share that, even with people that have hurt me, even with people that have hurt the people that I love, or, because we all do that.
Yeah. Any last thoughts on living in freedom before we move on?
I would just say, I think a view that has helped me, this came to me just within the past couple of years, is that for a long time, I felt like I was trying to understand God through the lens, the filter of my circumstances. And so here's God. Sorry, I'm holding my hands up, but here's God. But what's in front of him is my circumstances, my past wounds, my grief, my insecurities, my doubts, my fears, my shames, all of that. And I try to understand God through that lens. And every time we do that, God's always going to fall short, always. But the beautiful thing is that all we have to do is flip that around. That the freedom is found when we understand our circumstances and our wounds and our hurts through the lens of a loving and good God. And it's when we get that order right, that's where that unleashing, that's where that freedom really seems to take over. And that's just, I don't know, it's what I'm learning.
Amy, that's so good.
No.
Thank you. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop crying now.
Okay.
We're going to talk about your favorite 5.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
What are 5 things that you are doing or listening to or reading right now that are just your favorites?
Good. Okay, that's a fun thing to shift to. Okay, one of my favorite 5s is my new UGG throw blanket.
Oh,
I don't know if you've heard of these. So you've probably heard of UGG boots.
sure.
Love my UGG boots, but they have these amazing blankets that are out. And I don't know if you have a Kohl's department store in your area, but
Yeah.
so they sell them there. And I love my UGG throw. I'm under it right now. So I've given this as gifts, and it's definitely one of my favorite things right now.
Okay, I love that. And it's still
Everybody
winter.
needs an UGG. Yes.
Freezing here right now, so perfect.
Yeah. The only problem is it makes me a little too lazy sometimes because it's hard to get out from underneath it every now and then.
Yes.
I would say another favorite 5 is a seasoning, and it's called Charlie's Choice. My husband, I think it was one of his hunting friends introduced it to him years ago, and he orders it in the case. It's a case load. My husband is an incredible cook. He can cook anything. I am not so much. I've got my few things, but it's one of those things that we put on everything.
Okay, that was my question. What do you use this for?
Gosh, that's what's so great. I'll put it in green beans or chicken pie or chili, or of course, Chad puts it on anything he throws on the grill. So if you're like me and you need some extra help, get some Charlie's Choice, and it's going to just take your cooking to the next level.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Very easy. Let's see. Another favorite 5 is the Cause Box. It's one of those, it's a subscription type box. My husband gets it for me every year for my birthday. So his job is done, which makes it easy for him. But it's seasonal. It comes out once a season, so 4 times a year. But it's filled with items that support a cause throughout the world. So it could be sex trafficking, or it could be amazing entrepreneur women in Kenya that it's jewelry, or something like that. So there's usually about 8 to 10 different items in that box, and then it's beautifully packaged. And I'm always so excited when it arrives, and I can't wait to open it and dig through it and find all of the glorious things that I get to be introduced to, and just read about the stories behind each of those causes. It's a lot of fun.
Right. That's a surprise, and it is fun items, and it's supporting a great cause. I love that. Or causes.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like Christmas morning every time I get to open it all over again. So
how fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun. And then the next one is the Voxer app.
Oh, yes.
Do you love it?
I do.
Yeah, it is so great. So the Voxer, it was introduced to me by some girlfriends that I now have from, I mentioned the Women Speaker Collective that I went to in Chicago several months ago. And so there's a group of us, and we're on it and just share encouragement. I've got another dear friend who is a missionary in Nicaragua. And so that's how we stay connected and just send those messages back and forth. So it's a must have. Yeah. Great way to pray over each other. And then I would say my 5th favorite, that was 4 so far, right? Is a book that I'm just slowly digging through, and it's called Naked Spirituality, or Naked if you're from the South like me. But it's by Brian McLaren.
Okay.
And I'm just really enjoying this book as far as he talks about 12 different words that build our spirituality, and it's starting from scratch and walking us through spiritual development. So I'm just recommending that book to a lot of friends right now.
You said you're slowly digging through it. Is it, you have to read a little and process?
I think so. I don't think it's a really fast read. I like to take a chapter or so at a time and take some notes from that and stick it into an Evernote or, whatever I'm using at the time. But so yeah, it's not a terribly fast read, but it does have group discussion in the back. So I think it would be a great one to use, a small group study as well.
Those are really great. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Where can people find you?
So I have a business profile page on Facebook, and it's just my name, Amy Loflin. And then I also have a website, amyloflin.com. And I'm just using that to kind of just share my own thoughts and parts of my story, and just seeing where, God may take this desire to speak and share. So we'll just see what he has in store. I'm just trusting him with it.
Well, I so appreciate you coming on and sharing some parts of your story and just your ideas on how to live this way. And, it's a process and everyday thing. So anything we can learn and apply that helps us to live in freedom a little bit more.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
good.
It's a journey. We all need each other. And I applaud you and your efforts and connecting women and our stories. And we've got to just feel empowered and emboldened to do that, to be authentic and transparent. And I love it. So I am cheering you on, girlfriend.
Oh, thank you, Amy. Right back at you.
Thank you.
I hope you loved my conversation with Amy. She was an absolute joy to talk with. I love how she didn't claim to have everything figured out, but was just willing to say, hey, these are the things that God has showed me, and I want to use my voice to share it with you in the hopes that it can help free you too. John Piper writes about Galatians 5:1-5. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Christ's will is for you that you enjoy freedom. Where you go to school, what job you do, where you live, etc., are not nearly as crucial as whether you stand fast in freedom. If they were, the Bible would have commanded those things as clearly as he commands freedom, but it doesn't. Your enjoyment of freedom is much more important to God than many of the day-to-day decisions that fill us with so much concern. He says, a good test of your priorities in life would be whether you are just as concerned about the command to enjoy your freedom as you are about the other pressing decisions in your life. If you're looking for someone to speak at your upcoming event, be sure to get in touch with Amy. She would love to hear from you. If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, please share it with them this week. And friends, don't let the conversation stop when the show is over. Share your stories and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. Thanks for tuning in.